So I totally get that. Okay, well, let's have a look at this question here. As before, the yogi should react to the awareness rather than to the distraction, and should do so with a feeling of satisfaction that the awareness is there, of confidence that the mind is becoming well trained. But if it is a larger area, think of it in your mind as just a single location, not as a series of separate locations that the breath is moving over in a sequence. So I believe those quotes are from, they're not contiguous, they're from different discussions. Is that correct?
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
they are.
yeah, right. So recognizing that. Yeah, both of those were good things for me to have said. Okay, from the first, I have noticed that rather than seeing my alternating attention as distractions, getting in my way, using these as a moment for appreciation that my awareness is on was actually helpful in keeping it on with stable attention. Before, I would be aware of every moment of alternating attention I had, and even though I should not bother with them until stage 6, they had a sticky feeling or sticky effect on my attention. So I actually had the urge to manually direct attention many times, and it was tiring to keep repeating it. I also lack dealing with it in a skillful way, like using the body scan, which is also helpful. Any thoughts you could add? Just to clarify this, Gabrielle, so my first quote there about when a distraction arises, that recognizing it as evidence of your successful cultivation of awareness. Now, I gather you're saying that this is something that you have done and has been helpful. Yeah, I'm not quite sure what your question is. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Maybe you can just clarify for me what you're getting at there.
I think that the most difficult part is for the alternating attention, which I find I have to direct myself to the meditation object every time, and that gets a little bit tiring over time to just do this directing, alternating, directing.
Okay. Well, what you need to keep in mind here is that, yes, we're approaching this problem by degrees, starting with, in stage 2, when a distraction is so persistent that we actually forget the meditation object. Or not stage 2, stage 3, sorry, stage 3, where we actually forget. In stage 4, where it becomes a gross distraction. So in stages 3 and 4, that's where you are manually redirecting attention until it begins to happen automatically. But are you finding yourself doing that with subtle distractions? First of all, that you can observe the movements of attention that are associated with creating a subtle distraction from just something in awareness is that speaks very highly of the quality of your practice and the awareness that you've developed. So are you in fact trying to to prevent your attention or to correct from even subtle distraction?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand. I understand what you said, but I didn't understand the difference between the two.
Okay, well, the gross distraction, you realize that there is a gross distraction present. And so you bring your attention back.
Yes.
As you get better at this, you become aware that something is becoming a gross distraction, and you correct for it.
Yes. Yeah. He's frozen. Just for me or for everyone? Yeah, okay.
Such and such started to become was on its way to becoming a gross distraction, and my mind recognized it, and my mind corrected for it, and I don't have to do anything intentionally, right? You've had that experience?
I'm sorry, I just lost everything that you say because you froze on my screen.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, every now and then a message that my internet connection is unstable, which is really, I don't know why that is.
Yeah.
Okay, so once again. So in stage 4, once you recognize that something has become a gross distraction, you refocus you intentionally refocus your attention on the meditation object.
Yes.
Then as you go along, you begin to notice when a distraction is starting to receive more and more movements of attention, alternating attention, and to become a stronger distraction. And then you intentionally bring your attention back. But with sort of with the towards the culmination of stage 4, you start to have the experience of being aware that a certain distraction was starting to receive more attention, was starting to become a stronger, more prominent distraction, but that your mind recognized that and corrected for it automatically so that you didn't have to exert the effort of refocusing your attention. That's the experience I'm wondering if you have had.
Yeah, I have had, yes.
Okay, great.
It goes automatic at some times, but in others,
Okay. All right.
in other times, it just feels like my attention is alternating everywhere, and that gets a little bit a struggle. Yeah.
Well, see, that's until you get to stage 6, the normal state of affairs is that your attention is going to be alternating briefly with a variety of things, which is going to mean that there's going to be a lot of subtle distractions. As your awareness becomes stronger, and as your overall, what I refer to as conscious power, that's one of those kind of a made up words to describe something that don't have good technical language for. But what I describe as more conscious power, it seems as though that your mind is alternating with more things than it used to. But that's primarily the fact that you're just now much more aware that it's doing so. That's a characteristic usually of someone after stage 4. You get into stage 5, and it seems like there are more distractions in the background than there were before, but that now none of them become gross distractions because the mind just corrects for them automatically, right? So if you're still in the process of getting there, then it's really fine anytime you notice that a distraction is starting to receive more attention, that you intentionally return your attention to it until the process does become automatic. But you will have seemingly an increase in the number of subtle distractions in the background. Are we together on this so far?
Yeah. And when that happens, what should I do?
Well, what you should do is just let it be. In stage 6,
that's the hard part.
In stage 6, you're going to use a different approach to overcome those subtle distractions. But until you're in stage 6 and using those techniques, you just allow those subtle distractions to be there. And the fact that you're aware of more of them before, it's not that you're having more of them before, so much as it is that you're aware of the ones who are already there more than you were before. Okay. And so you just accept it and you let that be and you take that for what it is. Ah, that's a sign that my awareness is growing stronger. Okay. And that's a good thing. That's what you want. What you don't want to do is to start going and those very brief flickering movements to different things in the background. It's like I don't know, trying to catch flies or something. It's impossible. You just can't grab them all. And not only that, there's no point in it and there's no need to. You've already accomplished what's really important up to this point. In stage 5, you're further increasing the power of your mindfulness. And so you're both accepting the presence of these subtle distractions at the same time as recognizing that it's a sign of your success in your practice that you are so aware of them. And when you get to stage 6, that's where we want to that's where we're going to take on these subtle distractions head on. And in stage 5, we're much more interested in subtle dullness, sustained subtle dullness. So we just let the distractions be there. And the more distractions you're aware of, then the less subtle dullness there is. So that's a good thing, right? That's a sign of progress. But don't go chasing after them like trying to catch fireflies or something. And
I don't know if you can hear me, but the screen froze again. So
He's reconnecting now. He just lost his connection again.
okay, thank you.
Yep.
Can you hear me now? Okay. I have no idea what happened, but I just completely lost all internet service there so what I've done is so I'll have to figure out what's happened to my motive later. So Gabrielle, can you let me know where I was when I lost the connection?
I think that the last part that I remember was talking about letting it be. I think that it was what stick with me, but I really don't remember what was the last thing.
Yeah, just let those
last part of
subtle
the
distractions be. I'm sorry, say that again.
I think it was the last part of the first question.
Yeah, the last part of the first question was what you need to do is
You probably need to turn your video off.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that.
Let those go until you're
You're
ready,
lagging
when
really
you feel like
badly.
you've adequately dealt with sustained subtle dullness. Okay. All right. I turned the video off. I know that my video is off. I can see movement. You can hear me okay?
A little
Yes.
better.
Okay, great. All right. Yeah, what I was about to say, Gabrielle, is that the acuity of your perception of the movements of attention and the suggests to me that you've probably achieved the goals of stage 5 in terms of overcoming sustained subtle dullness, and that the time is right for you to move into stage 6, where you will essentially begin the process of overcoming subtle distractions by just holding the intention to ignore anything other than maybe bodily sensation that arises. And this is where it's useful to take the body scanning technique that you use in stage 5, and have you practiced and developed that adequately? Do you feel satisfied with? But doesn't matter. That's the practice that you're going to want to use. You're going to be making such demands on your attention with trying to experience the whole body with the breath that your attention it just doesn't have the ability to alternate with distractions in the background to the same degree. Your intention is to more specifically target the mental, those things of mental origins, thoughts, emotions, images, and things like that, that hold the greatest power to capture your attention. And they will eventually begin to fade away. And then you're moving towards mental pliancy, or not mental pliancy, but yeah, mental pliancy. You're moving towards it, and you will continue to move towards it over the next stages. But you're overcoming the strongest source of distractions, which are mental objects. And so this will mean that subtle distractions that you experience, you haven't, you expect to totally conquer subtle distractions. Those of a mental nature rarely intrude, and those of a sensory nature are much less likely to turn us and to become subtle distractions. So that's the work that you want to do. So in answer to your okay, I'm reconnected again. I hope. What I'm going to, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, great. What I'm going to do in the background is to move on to the second part of Gabrielle's question. I'm assuming, or I was asking when I lost the connection if you felt satisfied with that answer.
Yeah, it was really good. Yes.
Good.
Thank you.
Then I'll move on to the second part. At the same time, I'm going to boot up a different computer, and if see if I get a better result if this happens again. Okay. Now I will return to the second part of your question.
Just a second, Culadasa. You mentioned the stage 6 practice, and
Yes.
sometimes when I started, the sensations start to get a little bit like, I don't know what I'm feeling. And when that happens, should I go back then?
But the sensations, you have to tell me a little bit more. What happened?
What I mean is the sensations are not very clear when I do the body scan.
Oh, I see. When you start doing the body scan, okay,
Yeah.
what you're doing is you're really making a lot of demands on your, as I said, your power of consciousness there by expanding it. So rather than trying to experience the breath in the whole body at once, maybe start with the torso or head and torso and expand it from there.
Oh, okay, nice.
Okay. So just, yeah, so you're sort of on the boundary between stage 5 and stage 6. Maybe you need a little more reinforcement, a little more training of the mind against going into subtle dullness, a little more increase in the power of your mindfulness altogether.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, that's what it sounds like where you are. Your second, I have noticed that I was actually focusing on a defined location, but within that location, there would be these separate smaller ones. I think this had an effect in my breath, which was not continuous, but rather it was going on bursts of resistant movements, which disrupted the cycle. This would happen especially on my out breath and in the pause. So I would have difficulty identifying a pause because there would be an extra out breath to feel something. Yes. Okay, I know what you're talking about there. I have only seen this post today, and after trying it, seemed to be correlated with focusing location. Yes, but I need to make sure of it through practice and also get used to using this. What it is a larger area as a single location. This is also pointing to a nodule in submaxillary gland, which blah, 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 could not getting better. It actually hurts throughout my whole day with varying intensities. Okay. Let me just run through something and see if we can address this effectively. You're frozen again. Can you still hear me? Yep. Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right. Maybe everybody's just holding still. Myself, on the in-breath, I feel the in-breath most clearly just at the edge of my nostrils. On the other hand, the out-breath, within your nostrils are some shelf-like projections. And so I feel the out-breath about here. Inside my nose, I feel it most clearly here inside my nose at about this level here, where those little shelf-like projections are. They serve a purpose of helping to moisturize, warm air, or cool, warm the air, and also increase surface area for olfactory sensors. It serves a lot of purposes. Nevertheless, your out breath tends to be softer, and in my case, I feel it more up in here. But the subjective experience I have is not of shifting my attention from the edge of the nostril, the rim of the nostrils on the in-breath to inside my nostrils. It's like treating them as one location and not moving back and forth. So just expand the scope of your attention to include both of them. And even that tissue in between is going to have some sensation, some contribution of sensation to both the in and the out breath. So all you need to do, if you're like me, now I know what you mean about, this is not uncommon. On the pauses, there is, it's the same way early on that we unconsciously exaggerate aspects of the breath in order to make it more clearly. And if, let me just do it here. See, I just, yeah, there it is. Okay. There's a very sensitive area in the back of the palate of your throat, is the little part, the hanging down thing called the uvula. You know what I'm talking about? That's a very sensitive area. Okay. You can, if you add a little force to the out breath, you can feel that you can get sensations in that uvula. And it's something that, it's just something the mind will do at an unconscious or non-intentional level to try to enhance the sensations. And so just recognize that it's not necessary, that the pause is an absence of sensation. And, if your mind is doing that, just recognize that it's doing that. And just the part of your mind, the unconscious part of your mind that is controlling that or causing that to happen is going to receive the information from your conscious mind through the intention to just accept and ignore that, and it'll stop doing it. It'll go away. Okay. So I think the main thing is just expand this area where you feel things clearly, accept that the end of the out breath is the subtlest of the four beginnings and endings. And so often the experience of the pause, one of the ways to bring that most clearly into attentional focus is working backwards from the beginning of the in breath to where, okay, I know I'm in the pause. I'm not sure when the pause began, when the out breath ended and the pause began, but then you work backwards from it, and probably fairly quickly you'll come to that place. And you know, it's not an exact point that you're going to stick a pin in, but you're going to come to that place where, okay, I'm close enough. I know when the out breath is ended. I know when the pause is there, and your mind will stop trying to fulfill your intentions in ways that don't actually accomplish what you want. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, it does.
Yeah. Good.
So I should not struggle to have this lack of sensation. I should just let it be and acknowledge if I really enforce in the out breath, right?
Yeah, if you notice there's a sensation arriving when what you're expecting is a lack of sensation.
Okay.
Now, at some point, you may actually experience some sensation during that pause because there is some background sensory information. In general, this is a mechanism of the brain, like a sensory receptor that is continuously stimulated will stop sending signals. But the other thing that happens is that in your brain, at the level of where that sensory signal rises to the level of being processed consciously, that will also be shut off. But so most of the time, we're unaware of subtle, ongoing, any continuous sensation. Like you're sitting on your seat, you don't really feel that until you direct your attention towards it. You know, the clothing touching our body, things like that. And so this is a completely normal mental mechanism. You may come to the place where you bypass that and you're actually feeling these ongoing sensations. And if you do, that's great, but it's not necessary. It's not special. But it's good. It's fine. It's wonderful. But primarily what you're going to experience is just the sensations that you were following have disappeared in that area, that expanded area where you're following them. There's just a period where there's either no sensation or you may experience a background sensation. Okay? Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
These are pretty fine-grained details we're talking about here. And I don't mind that, but yeah, it's interesting that you're bringing these questions up. These are the kind of questions I usually get in meditation interviews. So nothing wrong with that. Okay. If you're satisfied, then we'll go to Mark's question.
Yes,
could we
it's fine for me.
a little bit about the phenomenology of stages 8 and 9 samatha? What is your experience of having the sensory minds pacified and the joy, peace, and equanimity that unfolds? You're asking for a kind of a subjective description. The phenomenology you're referring to as a subjective description.
Exactly. So when the sensory minds are pacified in stages 8, what phenomenology is left? It's not the crass external sensory information, but there is still phenomenology left. And I thought it would be useful to me to hear what that feels like to you from the inside.
Yes. So specifically going sense by sense, the body tactile sense is the one that, it's the largest sense organ in your body. And it's actually not one sensory system, but many sensory systems. And referring to it as one is a bit of a naive, but that's beside the point. But the fact that it is such a large sense organ and that it does involve so many sensory modalities means that anybody who experiences this kind of physical pliancy is going to experience this. What happens is it varies somewhat from one individual to another, but for me, it's, and it went through some changes as it developed, but where it is specifically for me right now is that there's the sense of my body, but it's as if it's an empty, as it's empty, and there is just this delicate definition of the inside from the outside. And it is characterized by a very pleasant, extremely comfortable feeling. And the breath becomes very subtle and quiet, and any movement that takes place tends to be very disturbing to this pleasant peacefulness, and it quickly returns. So a momentary perturbation, but then you come back to this. Now, things that I have experienced before, in the past, and well, still do occasionally, sometimes there is a very distinct feeling of effervescence, as though this outline of my body, it's like the surface of a glass full of carbonated water, right? And all the bubbles are forming on it. Yeah, right. So and that too is a very delicate and beautiful and wonderful feeling. Leading up to that, it can be a more intense feeling and not quite so pleasant. One of the most interesting things is alterations in proprioception. So feeling as though your body were in a different position, different shape, all kinds of things like that. As far as I'd say the next thing that are most common after that are the inner light, the luminous phenomena, which can be used as an object to enter jhana, and the other is a sound like a meditation-induced tinnitus, really, which sometimes lingers and worries people. They say, "Oh no, meditation has given me tinnitus." Well, that does sometimes persist in that way. I have actual tinnitus, so I have the opportunity of recognizing the difference between this inner sound, called in the yogic tradition called nada, and there is a whole practice called nada yoga where you use this inner sound as a meditation. As a matter of fact, there's the sound and light meditation, which is taught within the Sikh tradition. We're using both the light. I mean, the point of the meditation is to get to the point where you have the luminosity, and you also have the inner sound, the nada. But yeah, and all of this subsides into the background, and the inner sound or nada becomes kind of like a white noise. It just filters out everything else, and then you cease to, it ceases to be present in consciousness much at all. On the other hand, the light tends to become more intense. It will go from being maybe relatively focused in the middle of your visual field to expanding to, and I've had the experience of it corresponding to almost every kind of religious iconography I've seen, where it seems to be emanating from my head, emanating from my heart, radiating out from my entire body, or just to be from everywhere at once and to be penetrating my body and all the space around it. But there tends to be this increase in it, which I think is what makes it such a nice object for entering jhana with when it becomes strong like that. At the same time, as you go along, unless you're intentionally using it, it just, once more, it's part of the background. So you have this pleasant sensation of sort of this thin and perhaps effervescent shell of your body, the nada sound, the luminosity. A few people, I haven't experienced this except on a few rare occasions, will also, there will be the rising of a pleasant odor or even a taste in the mouth. And there are yogic meditations where, you know, they call this the nectar, or sometimes the divine nectar. And that seems to be the least common of the senses. Well, most of the time, that process of habituation of the mind to the relatively constant taste of your own saliva and the whatever ambient odor, unchanging odor there is, that tends to get filtered out by the mind anyway. So it's, you know, I'm speculating, but I think it's because of the nature of what happens with those senses that it's much more rare to experience the pleasant smells and the pleasant tastes. Is that the kind of phenomenology you're getting at?
Yeah, that's great. Maybe just one more. So when the sensory minds pacify and what's left over is this inherently joyful and peaceful phenomenology. And like you say, it can come in a couple of different ways. For me, it's less, although there is, like, I empathize with your sense that there's a thin outline. I have a sense that all that's left is a sort of fuzzy bag about here in the middle, except for that data that's still there. And it's not crass physical data, so that's been pacified, but the data that's left feels like it's inherently joyful and peaceful.
Yes.
And it's very, very fine grain, and it is sort of, you know, spatially bound, sort of here-ish. Now, taking that as an object with either the practices like still point or meditating on the mind, I feel are particularly beneficial here. So now you've pacified the sensory minds. What's left is this inherently joyful and peaceful phenomenology. We now take that and observe the space either around it or within it or the observer of it. And I notice that what begins as joyful then goes through a transformation. It becomes more and more subtle, just like the mind became more and more subtle and the crass sensations became more and more subtle. Is that your experience as well? And maybe you can just say a little bit about this transition from it being, and I know we don't want to cut the ontology too sharp here, but from joy to peace to equanimity.
Yes.
What does that feel like as that becomes thinner for you?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, right. Yes, thinner. That's it's hard to find appropriate words, but you should add that to the lexicon of expressions to try to convey what's happening. It doesn't cease to be present.
No.
But it becomes more and more, or less and less significant. Right, less and less significant. What's happening inside the mind becomes much more prominent. And in fact, there's a point at which that's just something that's happening within the mind. And even the sense of there being a physical body out there is something that you don't cease to know, but it's just not especially relevant to your experience. And that's just right into the, you know, if you've managed to train your attention not to coalesce around particular things that arise, then then you've gone right into that Mahamudra state.
Yeah, you've said it. You've said it exactly the way I've experienced it. In the same way as gross distractions and subtle distractions are given way not only by fascinating yourself to an object, but by inquiring and seeing that it's not very interesting. These little blips. That it's just the mind doing the same thing it does all the time. And as soon as you stop thinking it's so interesting, actually they get the volume turned down on them automatically, isn't it? You have an insight that, well, actually this stuff isn't as pertinent as I used to think it was. And that very much feels the same as the joy turning to peace, turning to equanimity.
Right.
It thins out as I'm able to accurately observe it to some degree, because in observing it, I notice actually it's not all that interesting. What's more interesting is the space of the mind, this greater stability that these things are occurring in, that actually they're little turbulences, and actually they start being a little bit boring turbulences in relationship to how beautiful and peaceful and deep the quality of spaciousness that they're arising from and passing away to. Does that sound sound right?
That's right.
Great.
Yes. Yep. That's
Great. I'm glad I asked. Thanks so much.
I'm glad you did too. I'm glad I got to hear you articulate that so well and so clearly.
Great.
So,
Excellent.
I put it in the chat, but Shinzen talks about things being feather light and paper thin.
Yes, yes. That thinness again. That's yeah. It's feather light and paper thin. Yes, and the lightness too. That's another term. It's the lightness, the subtleness, I don't know. Yes.
The heavier it is, the more it seems to grab, right? The lighter it is,
Yeah.
the more it just occurs. And
Yes, right. It's more like smoke or fog, more like fog than rain, more like smoke. Yeah. Yeah. Great. Okay, and then Gunnar's here. Wonderful, Gunnar. We skipped your question at the beginning because you weren't with us, and so I'm going to take that up right now. Can you hear me?
I can hear loud and clear, and it's a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you so much for having me and having us.
Well, thank you. It makes me happy. I really enjoy these sessions. So thank you for coming and adding something special to my day. So, okay, let me just look at your question here. There's an edit here at the top, but I'm going to read the question before the edit, okay? All right.
Yep.
I feel like my mind gets exhausted during my sittings, starting at the middle of the session, progressively increasing in exhaustion toward the end of it. It feels like it is a muscle that is getting fatigued, and that I have to put in a lot more effort in order to be able to keep the same amount of mindfulness. I've tried a few things which seem to have helped, like meditating in the morning, making sure I'm well hydrated, and actually have some light breakfast, banana with oatmeal, that's some carbohydrates there, feed the brain, to make sure my brain does not starve. Yeah. That being said, I'm concerned I might be mistaking exhaustion for simple dullness, although it does not feel like so, and that it may be best for me to go back and train my brain against strong dullness some more before continuing in stage 5. Then your edit said, I think it's actually hunger. In today's sitting, I started to hyperventilate and I got a bit of a headache. I might need to eat more breakfast. I wouldn't rule that out as a possibility, although, and I'm somewhat when it comes to hunger and eating and things like that, is that I can forget to eat for days at a time. But some people are much more sensitive, and you may be somebody who is much more sensitive to decrease in circulating levels of nutrients. None of us are in danger of starving in the course of a day or two, you know. But some of us are much more, let's say, the the physiology of the mechanisms that detect circulating levels, availability of nutrients, things like that. Some people, and you may be one of them, seem to be much more sensitive to those. And I seem to be relatively insensitive to those. But this is the kind of thing that ultimately does give rise to hunger. I don't know that that's necessarily what's going on here. When I read this, what I really want to ask you about, you know, you asked the right question: exhaustion versus dullness, and the two can be, you know, the exhaustion can lead to dullness, or the dullness can kind of masquerade as a kind of exhaustion. But what I'm really curious about, and you don't say what stage you're practicing at, and maybe you don't need to. What I'd really like to know is there some significant component of efforting, of subtle striving that's going on, and you really are exhausting yourself through sort of an ongoing striving or efforting. Do you think that's possible?
I would think that's possible, yes. I'm so I've been feel like I'm between stage 4 and 5, making advance
Okay.
to stage 5. I do have periods of perhaps no longer than 10 seconds where I do feel like my mind is unified. I don't want to use a wrong term, unified or pacified.
Well, it's a little bit, I mean, your mind, as you go along, your mind is becoming progressively more, but that's less important in terms of the things that you're experiencing right now. In that stage 5, in stage 4, overcoming strong dullness, in stage 5, overcoming subtle dullness, you're trying to crank up the energy of the system, the amperage of, you know, however you want to think of it. Now, this is something you need to induce. You can't, it's not something that you can make happen through will or striving or pushing, but it is, this is more than in many other stages. This is where that kind of efforting can arise, even in somebody who's managed not to experience that in the first few stages, because you really are trying to make your mind more powerful, stronger. And it's very natural to respond to that with the same kind of approach that you would take to building muscular strength or building endurance or something like that. It's by trying a little harder, pushing a little more, and things like that. But in this case, it's a process that happens by itself as a result of you doing practices that require that it happen. Okay, so you're creating the need for it. You're not making it happen. You're just making, you're just doing things with your mind that require more of this kind of mental power. And as a result of it, quite independently of will or anything like that, your mind is going to respond and strengthen these faculties in the right way. What can get in the way of that, though, is to the degree that you bring a component of striving or efforting into this, because you will create a feeling of exhaustion. That feeling of exhaustion will be associated with the very power that you are trying to induce your mind into further developing is kind of being drained away as a result of that efforting. And so you're kind of working against yourself to the degree that you're efforting. Are you kind of a go-getter? You take something on and you go after it? Is that sort of your personality type?
That is a great question. I would say that yes. Even though when I manage to do my sittings regularly, which lately has been the case, I am much less so.
Yes, well, that's really good. So that's the direction you want to go, is just more of a relax and do what you need to do and let it happen, right? So just you contrast your daily activities to meditation as meditation being much more relaxed, and so just move further in that direction, not to the point of laxity, but of relaxation rather than laxity. How's that? Does that kind of convey the meaning there?
It does. And now that you mention it, I am putting a lot of effort into it, and I am very eager to reaching higher stages, especially this is like the second time I'm making like a good push with your method, and I'm seeing great results, and I'm really excited about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, it all resonates a lot with me, Culadasa. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And
if I may, another one of those less is more kind of things, isn't it?
It is. Although I think it's in the chapter for stage 4, you said that effort can help with dullness, and I might have picked it up and never dropped it. It's like effort, or not effort. It's intention. That's different, right?
It's intention. Yes, the renewal, the sustaining of intention, a renewal of attention, of intention. I think I said attention. I didn't mean to. The sustaining and the sort of ongoing refreshing of your intention is, I speak of that as that's the only place you want your effort to be. But you even reach a point where that becomes progressively less of a tangible effort and more of a permission to occur.
Yep, that sounds about right. Thanks. And I can realize. I realize now that yes, I'm putting a lot of effort, and it's very hard to keep effort in narrowing the scope of attention and in trying to reach metacognitive awareness at the same time. It's very hard. It's like trying to pull something from both ends, right? And I think that's where I could improve.
Yeah.
If I may, just wanted to mention that was John Propp that got me to your method, and I'm really thankful for him. So his sends his regards.
Oh, that's wonderful. John, I just love John. He's fantastic. And he's as if you know John at all, he's this hard driving seen him do his, I don't know if it's 10 or 15 minutes. He does this incredible total body workout, jumping up and down, flapping his arms, kicking, doing all this kinds of stuff. And yeah, John really, he's had to deal with that efforting in a big way. I'd say of all my students, he's probably the expert on recognizing and letting go of efforting. So it's good that you have contact with it.
Good to know. I'll reach out. I'll reach out then. Yes. Thank you.
You're most welcome. Yes. I'm wondering maybe if I should take this opportunity to answer the question Ollie asked for yesterday and didn't get dealt with. That would, what that would mean is that we wouldn't have to have a catch-up Q&A. Although I don't know about you, but I almost feel like, oh, well, that's too bad. No catch-up Q&A. But all right, let's go ahead and look at Ollie's question, if you're all game. And you can read it if you just go on the Patreon page to the questions for Sunday the 15th. So Ollie says, how should somebody cultivate joy in stages 5, 6, and 7, whilst at the same time putting effort into the cognitively demanding tasks of overcoming subtle dullness and sustaining exclusive attention? Is it a simple case of continuing to notice pleasant aspects of the meditation as recommended in the chapter on stage 2, or is there a different approach to cultivating joy that starts to happen here? One that specifically appreciates the flavor of joy that comes from a more unified mind. It's all of these things. Is continuing to notice pleasant aspects of meditation, which at this stage, at least if you don't fall into the achievement trap, there become more and more pleasant aspects of meditation to hold in awareness. And so that is part of it. You know, that's the look for the joy. But now it's much easier to look for the joy because there's much more of it there. As the mind, as I say, throughout this process, the mind is becoming more unified. And as it's becoming more unified, there are more causes of joy. And just as in very early stages where you learn to take satisfaction in having a single in and out breath without having had your attention take you off to Timbuktu, you know, it's the same thing. It's just appreciating, enjoying all of the little the things, the noticeable decrease in dullness, the ease with which your mind recognizes and overcomes these can all be sources of joy and satisfaction. Even things like when physical pain comes up, able to just examine it and let go of it, it becomes a kind of joyful experience that, it's the knee still hurts or the neck or the back or whatever, but this just joy in the fact that I let go of resistance and now it's not such a problem, sort of thing. So those things are true, and they're an important part of it. Let's go back to something. Sometimes it's just language, and I wish you were here, Ollie, so that I could seek some clarification. You say, whilst at the same time putting effort into the cognitively demanding tasks of overcoming subtle dullness and sustaining exclusive attention. So this is the same thing that we were talking about a few minutes ago. These are cognitively demanding, but who are the demands being made on, or what are the demands being made on? So you're doing something in terms of the practice, and you're holding an intention But other than the holding, didn't be any other efforting. Okay, I'm getting an unstable internet connection. Can you still hear me okay? Okay, great. All right. So, yeah, what you're doing is you're creating the circumstances for you're putting a little greater demand on the cognitive system so that the cognitive system can respond. Okay, you're putting more emphasis on the recognition of subtle dullness and the brightening from it, but you're not trying to do it. You're trying to reveal its occurrence to the mind so that the mind can respond. So it's not that it's demanding something of you cognitively or an effort from you, because this is a really good place in the practice to keep in mind that I can't make this happen. That this sense of there being some agency here that's in control is really an illusion. And the closest thing to agent there is just the fact that I can hold an intention in my mind in terms of how I would like the mind to respond to certain things. But there's, and really, the I can hold an intention, that I doesn't exist. The mind is training itself, and so parts of the mind are holding intention, and other parts of the mind are responding to those intention. And this is a really good place, Ollie, to make positive use of that tendency to feel like there's some kind of an I that has to do things, in terms of just recognizing that if you let that go, that things go more smoothly, and there's not going to be as much exhaustion. There's not going to be the creeping in of dullness. Even if it's a little bit of an improvement, what that is telling you is, this idea that there's somebody in here making these things happen just really isn't true. And you're on the way to insight. When it comes time for a large part of your mind system to just bingo, turn on the light and realize this, you're going to be prepared. It's going to be oh yeah. How come I didn't know this all the time? Well, in a way, I did know this all the time. Okay, well, glad we got a chance to do that. Anybody want to close with a quick question or comment or anything like that?
Yes, I'd like to ask a question about how much attention should one give things like, I've had a slouch most of my life, so I try to sit up straight when I'm meditating, but then I notice I'm slouching, and so I pull myself up. Should I be making such an effort to keep my posture straight, or should I just let it do its thing?
Mm-hmm. Well, when you become aware that you are slumping or slouching, then just take that brief instant to correct your posture. One of the things that you'll notice if you do that consistently is sometimes you'll feel as though you're slouching. I don't know if you can see this on the screen. You'll feel like you're like this, but when you correct for it, you realize that you're more like, let's see, you're more just like that, and the correction is just, if it felt like this, but when you make the correction, you realize it was just, you just maybe raised your head, straightened your spine a little, just a little tiny bit. So, but yes, to a degree, but I mean, on the one hand, posture is not a necessary component of these practices. On the other hand, posture can be an incredibly powerful way of augmenting these practices. One person who is doing prolonged, more than a year retreat with me, worked a lot with posture and his own posture. He ended up, our meditation hall is a yurt has exposed studs that support the roof. So he ended up screwing a board onto one of those studs that was out far enough that when he was sitting on a cushion, he could butt his sacrum up against the edge of that board, and his thoracic spine and the back of his head. And he, just by training himself to stay in that position of alignment, he found that it remarkably improved the quality of his meditations. And so, on the one hand, I don't think, posture is not essential, but doing things like what you're talking about, just whenever you happen to notice that there's a slouching, just take that brief moment with total mindfulness and total intentionality and everything else, just that second or fraction of a second, whatever it takes, just to bring it back. Might take half a second. It's worth doing, and like anything else, what you repeat becomes habit, and eventually becomes the norm, and it will benefit you. Personally, I have a very strong kyphosis, and so my ability to sit straight is limited. So I have to derive this kind of information through the feedback from others, because I can't, other than doing something nasty to my vertebrae, I can't imagine any way of aligning the natural curves of my spine the way they should be, because I just have this, I'm almost a hunchback. I have very strong kyphosis, and it's familial. So, but yeah. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed this I was going to say afternoon. It's late afternoon, early evening for me. I'm sure for some of you it's other times of day, but thank you. It was wonderful. And until we meet again.